So I decided to set the Air Book Club in a bookshop in London during the Second World War because I have always wanted to set one of my stories in a bookshop. I think they're fascinating places. I started my career working in a bookshop. I can't think of a better place to spend my time than either a bookshop or a library. So that felt like the right place to set it. Also, I was writing this during the pandemic and I couldn't actually go to a bookshop. So I think in my writer's head, I needed to create my own world, my own bookshop. And so Bingham Books was born. I decided to set the Air Book Club during the Second World War. It's a period of history that really interests me. I think it's a fascinating historical time. A lot happened during those 6 years, and also personally, my parents grew up during the Second World War and I love listening to their stories. They used to tell me stories of being evacuated, my mother to Suffolk, my father to Yorkshire. So I personally have an affinity with that period of history and the people who lived through it. And also I was writing this book in 2021 when we were still very much in the pandemic. And I noticed the way that communities pulled together during both those periods of history, although the circumstances were very different. But during the Second World War and during the pandemic, we really saw how human spirit burns brightest when the world turns dark. In terms of research for the Air Book Club, I did a lot of research, of course, about the Second World War, but about specifics. I like the Kindertransport, about the history of bookselling in the early 20th century. There was a lot to research. And as I was researching this during the pandemic, unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to any of the museums. I would have visited the Imperial War Museum, which is a fantastic museum in London. But luckily, they have a lot of online resources. So I spent a lot of time studying those. I also read a lot of accounts, personal accounts of Second World War experiences, the BBC People's War Archive, which is absolutely fascinating. I did a lot of reading. I watched an incredible film about the Kindertransport experiences called Into the Arms of Strangers. And I did lots of other research about things like the 20th century, early 20th century bookselling, which was all really fascinating. My main challenge was not disappearing down the rabbit holes of research and making sure that I stayed focused, because there was so much fascinating stuff to read and research. My first proper job was as a bookseller, and I think that played a huge part in influencing the writing of this story. I worked in a big bookshop in London on Charing Cross Road, which is very famous as being the road where all the big bookshops were. There are still a few there left today. But I remember working there, and I remember it being such a vibrant, exciting place to work. We used to have celebrities coming in to buy books, but also I remember the community of booksellers and how we recommended books for people to read, and how being part of that world was something that I very much wanted to reflect in the Air Book Club. I think that books can do a lot to help us overcome difficult times. I can't really imagine anything better than escaping into a book or a story when the world turns dark. I think they have that unique ability to comfort and reassure and offer escape, and that's really what the Air Book Club is about. And it's of course about people sharing that love of books and of reading, but also I wanted to reflect that lovely feeling that we as readers get when we're reading a story and we can disappear into that world and we really feel that the author has written that story just for us. And I think that's a very special feeling.